Hello and welcome to the History of Bangalore. I am your host, Ramjee Chandran, and I invite you to join me in discovering the story of this fascinating city. In our opening episode, we bring you the story of a family that moved here in the late 13th century and made it all happen for the rest of us. But before I do, I would like to thank the Prestige Group whose support makes the History of Bangalore possible. Building cities one landmark at a time, they transform dreams into reality. You can be a part of the future. Simply add prestige to your life. And now, the story of the migration to Bangalore. There's an interesting story that I read in the 1927 edition of the Mysore Gazetteer that I would like to share with you. A story that begins in the twilight of the 13th century. In a small hamlet called Alur, which is near the even then important center of Kanchipuram, about 270 kilometers from Bangalore, there lived 7 families, simple people of the soil, known as ryots, a local word for farmers. Life for them was as pastoral as one could imagine, within the bounds of a typical South Indian Hindu society, with its expected mix of castes and creeds, and landlords and workers, chieftains and their agents. The place where they lived and worked, the village of Alur, lay in a tract of land called Morusunadu, named for their clan, the Morusu, a name still prevalent in the district. Bilingual, they spoke both Telugu and Kannada. The tribe worshipped as their deity the god Bairadeva, and the leader of this clan was Kempe Gowda, named after the deity. Now Kempe Gowda had a daughter, Doddamma, a maiden of such captivating beauty that it is said that stories of her flowed like a soothing breeze through the paddy fields. People whispered of her luxuriant hair, her knotted tresses so long that she often used them as reins to lead the cattle that she was tending to. But this pastoral and peaceful life the families of the clan had led and enjoyed, presumably for generations, was shattered when the local chieftain, or the polyglot, also a word that means local rich guy with a lot of clout, declared that he had fallen in love with Doddamma. And then he set about proposing marriage to the girl's family. But, powerful though he was, there was a problem. The polyglot was not an acceptable groom for the Gowda families, who, staunch in their traditions, rebuffed all attempts to forge such an alliance. Tension simmered as the polyglot persisted. Smitten by the beauty of Doddamma and clearly very possessive, he sent his agents around frequently and in fervent pursuit to the Gowda household with gifts upon gifts for what he considered his bride to be. Without any sign of a reasonable solution, the situation between them became increasingly tense as the Gowdas resisted all attempts of the polyglot's agents to make this alliance happen. They turned down every approach and every offer the polyglot's emissaries had made, but they did so politely and without dismissing the polyglot outright to his face. Such diplomacy was necessary. While Kempe Gowda and his clansmen were unwilling to enter into what they considered to be a misalliance for Doddamma, they also realized the need to handle this situation with some finesse, as they did not want to invite evil repercussions to befall their families at the hands of this polyglot. Sometimes, the more intelligent move and the greater bravery is to consider the good of the people around you, whose livelihoods and indeed lives are involved, rather than engage in violent actions, however justifiable such actions might be. So the clan met and decided that their futures lay elsewhere and came to the decision that they had to leave Alur forever. Meanwhile, the polyglot was understanding none of the clan signals. He was having none of that. He only heard what he wanted to hear. And he went ahead as though a wedding had already been fixed and as if he and Doddamma were already betrothed. All preparations were made as if for marriage, and the wedding day was even fixed. And worse, a marriage pavilion erected. While all this was going on, the Gowdas had already taken steps to leave Alur. They had quietly packed all their valuables and had made themselves ready to leave the district during the night. Considering that farmers wake up very early in the morning, the clan had to leave Alur no later than nightfall. So one night, they packed what they could take, and among the things that they loaded onto bullock carts was an idol of their god Bhairadeva. And then, claiming that such was their tradition and custom, they put all the gifts sent by the Palegar onto a dog, which they tied up to a milk post of the pavilion, and then they left their ancestral homes, their livelihoods, and their entire past, and started to move westwards. To the west of Kanchipuram is the Palar River. The Palar River originates in the Nandi Hills in the Chikballapur district of what is today Karnataka state. After flowing through Karnataka, Andhra and Tamil Nadu, it finally reaches its confluence with the Bay of Bengal in the small town of Vayalur, about 75 kilometers south of Chennai. Unlike the other rivers in the region, the Palar is independent of the Kaveri and flows directly into the Bay of Bengal. The 7 Gowda families, some say brothers, decided to make their way upstream. It is not clear if they knew their destination or if they were simply following the course of the river to its source. Their journey would have been largely on foot and on bullock carts, and what we can surmise is that they followed the path of the Palar until they could cross it, perhaps at a ford. Ford are shallow parts of a river where they could cross even with bullock carts. But as the story goes, they faced a danger as the Palegar, probably waking up to realize what had happened, had given chase to the group and was advancing upon them. The Gowda clan was in a tough spot. Danger was upon them from the furious Palegar behind and a river in spate that raged in front. There was no time to look for a convenient ford. It was either get across the river right then or stay and face mortal danger from the Palegar and his thugs. Maybe folklore grows wings, and with a willing audience even takes flight, but the story that survives was that when the Palegar's men were close, Dodama took off a earring and threw it into the Palar with an incantation to the goddess Devi Amma. Suddenly, the swollen and turgid river ebbed and parted, creating a navigable ford for them, allowing the group to pass safely across. And as soon as they did, the river closed up again and raged forth, blocking the advance of the Palegar, who probably returned home empty-handed. We will not know what circumstances led this thuggish Palegar to his conviction that Dodama was rightfully his bride, but the story of the river crossing, which is similar to the exodus of the Israelites, was attributed largely to the chasteness of the girl Dodama and her ability to appeal to the gods on account of her chastity. From the description of the turgidity of the Palar River, it is likely that this move from Kanchipuram would have been between the months of June and September, being the months of heavy rain, probably more September than June, considering that Kanchipuram is significantly downstream from its source in the Nandi Hills near Bangalore. While it originates in Nandi Hills, the Palar River is an underground river for the first 90 kilometers of its run, emerging in the vicinity of the town of Betamangala. It is likely that the route of the Gowdas had included several old towns in their path, including settlements, and reaching the town of Betamangala where the Palar surfaces. There is a dam on the Palar in Betamangala. It's called the Betamangala Palar Dam, and it has created a huge lake in the area that provides water for irrigation to the nearby agricultural fields and also providing water to the nearby townships, notably Kolar goldfields. This dam had been created centuries before the Odyssey of the Murasu Vakkalu from Kanchi. Inscriptions dating back to the 10th and the 12th century speak of this dam being breached and being rebuilt, once in the year 950 and another time in the year 1155. There have been other occasions in the 15th century as well on inscriptions. The journey of Rannabaire Gowda and his clan would have been over a distance of 250 kilometers and would have taken several days. Tracing their route was surprisingly uncomplicated on a map, and the existence of several small state and rural roads on the route points to old pathways that would have existed for travelers of that era. But however well-trodden their path, their journey was fraught not only with the danger of having to escape the Polygon and face the raging river, but also the uncertainty of their futures, having left everything behind, everything, their ancestral homes and their lives, and having come to what were new lands, to a totally new life, and needing to find new ground for themselves. First, the clan reached the bustling town of Kolar, where they briefly settled, before moving to Avati at the base of the Ramaswamy Betta, which is an imposing hill near the Nandi Durga, which is Nandi Hills, and this is about 50 kilometers from Kolar. When they reached Avati, there was something of a novelty. The descriptions of the clan arriving in Avati seem to have been a notable event. Arriving in carts, an uncommon sight in those times, they were called the Bandikappalu people, or cart riots, perhaps indicative of their relative affluence when compared to the locals. First, Ramjee Gowda and his clan set up modest dwellings, laying the foundations of what would evolve into the village of Avati, now recognized as Avati. However, while they had acted as a single unit when they were farmers sharing a common practice and a common life in Alur, losing their ancestral identity must have placed enormous stress on the bonds of their kinship. Even the ordeal that they shared during the Odyssey was not sufficient to bind them indefinitely. Besides, it is likely that they would have sensed great opportunities in lands which they had come to. Before long, they made the decision to disperse, each patriarch leading his own branch of the settlement elsewhere. Ramjee Gowda remained in Avati, overseeing its growth and development, while his son Mallabaire Gowda went on to establish the towns of Devanahalli, Dodbalapur and Chikbalapur. In later chapters or episodes of this podcast, we will return to Mallabaire Gowda, an ambitious high achiever. The Gowdas found themselves to be natural leaders, and soon each of them established himself as the leader of his region. Before long, the clans had spread significantly across the area and had established themselves in positions of power. Sannabaire Gowda ventured to Holavanhalli or Korampur, where he laid the groundwork for Kartagere in the Tumkur district. Timme Gowda charted a course to Sugatur near Jangamakote, rising to prominence as the ruler of Kolar and Punganur, and carved out the foundations of Hoskote. A descendant of Timme Gowda would later establish Anekal. All these names familiar to people living in Bangalore because these areas are almost a part of Bangalore. Now that accounts for only 3 of the clan of 7. The destinies of another 3 have been lost to history. But important to our story was the 7th patriarch of the Morasu Wakalu, who established himself in Yalahanka, marking the culmination of their migratory odyssey. He was Jaya Gowda, the great-grandfather of the man who would become the founder of Bangalore, Kempe Gowda I. While this story is about the ancestry of the founder of Bangalore, coming up this season, all the stories of all the centuries that led up to it. When we come back, did all this really happen? Joining us on the History of Bangalore is eminent historian Dr. S.K. Aruni, Deputy Director of the Indian Council for Historical Research, and architect historian Yashaswani Sharma.
Prestige Group brings to you its latest launch, Prestige Somerville, lake-facing 3 and 4-bed apartments on Marathahalli, Whitefield Road. For more details, call 85489 85489. Project is RERA approved.
Today, it is my privilege to be able to introduce my very first guest. He is Dr. S.K. Aruni. Dr. Aruni is a scholar, a historian, and the author of many books of history. He is one of the most respected figures on the matter of Bangalore history and indeed the history of the larger region, and I could not ask for a better guest on the show. Sometimes you meet people and you come away with the feeling that you've done the right thing. That pretty much describes my first meeting with Dr. Aruni. And now here he is joining me in the studio. Dr. Aruni, welcome to the History of Bangalore.
Thank you, so nice. Thank you very much. I'm indeed very happy to be part of this program.
The privilege is all mine, but thank you for being here. Let me plunge in with a question. You heard me doing the narrative of the story of the migration.
Yes, sir.
In your opinion, how much of it is plausible? How much of it is true?
Yes, sir. Migration stories are always associated with any dynasty. Always folklore is associated with the dynasties. Even you go to the Chalukyas or Rashtrakuta, their legends are associated with them. They claim that Surya Vansha, Chandra Vansha. So basically, ascertain and get the endorsement of to endorse it from the larger perspective. That's always this kind of migration or any legends associated with the dynasties. With special reference to the Yalahanka Nadu Prabhus, which you have narrated, is very interesting.
Thank you.
We are talking about this is a very interesting story. It's associated with the Kempe Gowda family. Whereas I feel it is a 15th, 16th century. The migrations, lot of migrations. Not only this Nada Prabhus, there are other community also migrated from the one place to another place. I look at it such as for example, Tigalas in the Karnataka, which is they claim that they come from the Chittoor region and Tirupati area. Tigalas, lot of horticulturist migration theories also there. Similarly, Bedas, Bedas, the Nayakas, what you call.
Right,
they also claim that they come from the Tirupati region and migrations was conducted, and they came to the Vijayanagara area and they served the army in the Vijayanagara. So I look at it as a historian and look at this theory is a unanimous unity among all these communities.
The story that we are discussing today is very plausible from a geographical standpoint, and all the references seem to be correct. So
Yes.
was this just built up over time?
Yes, sir. You are right. That migration theory geographically it fits with the area which is the migration Kanchi, Palar and other things. Of course, these are all when the stories are built up. So they build up with the contemporary sources of that particular period.
Of that time, right.
Yeah.
And indeed, this story has been narrated several times from different sources.
There are three different stories of migrations. The Bangalore Bakair, that is our source of the Bakair is the documents. Bangalore Bakair. It was composed in around 1700 somewhere, 1750 somewhere. So the Bakair narrates the story, number one. Similar story is also recorded in the Baramal records. Baramal is nothing but Karkot area.
Right.
Baramal also documents this story. Third one is also one historian of the family, S.K. Narasimhaya, also narrates this. He has made his own collections of documents, and he has narrated this Kanchipuram, Melavanji, Putturu, and Ranabaire Gowda, Doddamma. These three different documents provide the different stories actually altogether.
Yes, but I noticed that each of them differs somewhat from the other.
Exactly, you're right, sir. Yes. Some, somebody in one of the story talk about the Tungabhadra rather than Palar.
Yeah.
In one of the story they talk about the Palar, and also they talk about the places which is Avati and some other places, and so overall it is a migration from one place to another place, from east to west. So this is very interesting for the origin and development of one particular dynasty. This migration will help us to construct the history of the local dynasties like Yalahanka Nadu Prabhus.
Now, one of the people that didn't like this migration story at all is T.V. Annaswamy.
Yes, sir.
In his book, he mentions some epigraphical evidence, and quoting that, he says, you can put the story to rest. Now, if you read what he points to as epigraphical evidence, the connections are rather tenuous
And,
in terms of
yes, sir.
just using that to outright reject the story and suggest that it didn't happen in the timeline of the 13th century. Maybe you can help me.
Please.
Help me understand what Annaswami's connections were.
I dispute with that chronological order of the Annaswamy because I dispute the theory of the establishment of the Yalahanka Nadu from the 13th or 14th century because there are reasons which I disagree with that because we have no historical records to claim that Yalahanka Nadu Prabhu's dynasty established in 13th century. Inscriptions refer to this dynasty comes from only around 1500 onwards. There are some inscriptions 1300 they claim, but there are similar names are there Kempaya, Kempanna. However, recent scholars have made a extensive research. The recently PhD completed by Dr. H.G. Rajesh on the Yalahanka Nadu Prabhu's history and culture submitted to the Mysore University and it has been awarded. So in that thesis, new evidences have been brought into this volume. Now, 21st century, lot of research has been completed and there are lot of information have been gathered and out of that, this research has been conducted by Rajesh, can be taken as a serious research on this subject and we can, take them as a fresh documents about the foundation of the dynasty.
So, in summary, folklore has a tendency to go in and out of verifiable history and, of course, the narrative history. But where do you draw the line? And how is folklore used or useful in historical narratives?
This story is seven brothers. We should take it as a folk because why the seven number occurs there. It occurrence of the seven number itself is very important for us. For seven numbers is associated with all our superstitions, particularly seven Yod Janma, seven
Yes.
lives, Sapta Sagara, Sapta Kunda. See, though these are all numeric associated with the particular. So that might be taken as a from that angle. We have no historical documents to prove any one of these seven brothers establishing the different places there. Every dynasty has a legendary beginning, origin. So, as a historian, I treat it as a legends associated with the dynasties. So, it showed that the dynasty was very important for the public.
That was enlightening.
Thank you so much, sir.
And as I go through the history of Bangalore, I hope that you will join me on later episodes as my guest for more such enlightenment.
Certainly, I'll be glad to. I am so interested to learn from you also. Thank you so much.
Those tables are not going to get turned. Thank you, Dr. Aruni, and speak to you soon.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
My next guest is architect historian Yashaswani Sharma. Among other things, Yashaswani is known for having designed and built the memorial or mandapa that houses the famous Kitaya stone. Now, not only did she design it in the standards of the Ganga dynasty, but actually built it using the methods that they would have used in the 8th century. I discovered Yashaswani when I was researching the history of Bangalore, and I came across her wonderful book, Bangalore, the Early City, AD 1537 to 1799. And now here she is joining me in the studio. Yashaswani, it's wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ramjee. Very nice to be here.
So the topic today is going to be the story of the migration that you just heard me narrate.
Yes.
The big question is whether this story is true or if it's even plausible or largely plausible. Now, things would be easier if there were written family records, but there aren't any, are there?
The history of a family is usually a Vamshavali. The ancestry is usually written down in kadatas on either palm leaf or on a cloth.
Right.
And these kadatas are maintained by the court historian. So we don't have any such thing regarding Kempe Gowda family because he was not a king. So what he is have the Vamshavali written down during a later period. But we don't have Vamshavalis for other smaller rulers, principality rulers or governors. So that is where the problem arises because you start questioning whether it is word of mouth that the story carries.
And to your profession, is there any architectural evidence?
As an architectural historian, I would say I would try to and look for, say, tangible heritage evidences, and that happened during later period of time.
Right.
I cannot find it for Ranabhai Gowda, who migrated and did something, but you have these stories on these place names which are consistent, whether coming from Alur, and you have Avati, and that is the Kolar route, and they come through Kolar, and many historians, many Indologists who are researching now do mention Mulbagal, do mention these places, and they speculate they could have come from there. Now, what we do know is that they are Morosova Kaliga
Yes, that is right.
clan,
Right.
and I happened to meet somebody from the family, a descendant from the family called Sharda Payana, who's a Kannada writer based out of the United States of America. And she had come down and she did say that their mother tongue is Telugu and that they are Morosova Kaliga. So that much is confirmed. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what we have to do is look at secondary sources, look at the stories, look at the place names, and see
Mm-hmm.
whether these kind of migrations happened at that time and
Mm-hmm.
whether such a route was available. Now, we
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
know that the southern highway was available,
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of land grant and the kind of polygarchip that the seven brothers kind of distribute among themselves happens from that direction, from the direction of the Palar River, right? And they come to Sugatur, they come to all these places and settle down.
So the records of the histories of royal families are kept by the court historians, but even if individual families wanted to record their histories, I imagine that literacy would have been a major impediment.
Yes, yes. Sharda Bayan did mention that literacy, yeah, literacy was an issue, and she is one of the first, women to be educated, and she's a writer herself, so she takes it very seriously.
Right. So, in summary, you're saying that what the story has going for it is the descriptions of its geography, all of which seem to be correct.
The route exists,
Mm-hmm.
and these place names exist, and the river name exists. So you can make a reasonable assumption that the migration story may have some factual origin.
It might. But truly, there are some fantastical bits to that story.
So I would suggest take out the fantastical part of it and then analyze the story.
I submit. And with that, Yashaswani Sharma, thank you so much for being my guest today. And I hope you'll get back on the show. There's so much to talk about.
I'll definitely get back on the show. This is very interesting.
And that is the story of how the Kempe Gowda family made it to Yalahanka and made it all happen for the rest of us. In the forthcoming episodes, I will bring you stories of the battles for Bangalore, the heroes, the victors, the dynasties, and so much more about how people live their lives. Where do they get their water from? What do they eat? It is remarkable to see how much that happened in the 8th century visits us even today. But coming up, how did we discover the history of Bangalore? Where did the information come from? And who gathered this information? To find out, stay tuned for our next episode, a tribute to the man who discovered our early history for us, Benjamin Lewis Rice. I am Ramjee Chandran, and this is the History of Bangalore.